In a forgotten village pressed between the mountains and the sea in the Philippines, lived a poor young man named Mateo. His home was not really a house, just thin wooden boards nailed together, with a roof made of rusted tin sheets that screamed loudly whenever rain fell from the sky. At night, cold wind slipped through the cracks and wrapped around his body like a blade. His only bed was a worn mat on the dirt floor, and some nights, he slept hungry, listening to his own stomach cry louder than the insects outside. Mateo owned almost nothing. No television. No phone. No guitar. No mirror. The only thing he had, was his voice. Every evening, as the sun bled into the horizon and the village lights flickered weakly, Mateo would sit outside his broken home and sing into the darkness. Not for applause. Not for dream. But to escape the pain of being poor. His voice was his blanket, his food, his prayer. When he sang, the world became kinder for a few minutes. And the sound was impossible. It did not match his thin body or tired eyes. When Mateo opened his mouth, something ancient and powerful came out. His voice traveled across bamboo fences and narrow dirt roads. It wrapped around homes. It stopped spoons in midair. Even dogs fell silent. Mothers whispered to their children, "Listen, listen carefully." People said his voice was darker than night and deeper than the ocean. Some said you could feel it in your chest before you could hear it in your ears. A fisherman once compared it to thunder trapped in human skin. Yet Mateo did not know how special he was. He only knew one thing. When he sang, he did not feel poor anymore. One humid evening, while Mateo sang beside a small roadside store with flickering lights and broken speakers, his cousin Leo stood quietly in the corner, holding an old phone with a cracked screen. The battery was low. The camera was shaky. The sound quality was poor. But Leo felt something strange in his chest. Mateo's voice poured into the warm night like liquid gold. Every note sank deep and slow, like it was written in pain. The few people passing by stopped walking. A tricycle driver turned off his engine. Even the store owner forgot to count his coins. Leo pressed record without saying a word. Mateo kept singing, unaware that his life was being captured in that tiny lens. Barefoot. Sweat on his face. Shadows on the wall behind him. And then that voice again, heavy, dark, rich, and powerful. It did not belong to the streets. It belonged to the world. When the song ended, a woman wiped her tears. A man whispered, "That man's voice is impossible." Later that night, inside a hot, crowded room and with internet that came and went like breathing, Leo uploaded the video with no plan, no dream, just a simple title. Poor Filipino man sings like Elvis. They slept as usual that night. Hungry. Unaware. But while they slept, the world was waking. By morning, the phone wouldn't stop shaking. Notifications flew like fireworks. Hundreds. Then thousands. Then millions. Words from strangers, languages Mateo had never seen, hearts and flames and shocked faces filled the screen. People from across oceans asked, "Who is this man? Where has this voice been hiding? Is he real?" Mateo stared at the glowing screen with disbelief. He touched his face, as if checking if he was still poor. If he was still dreaming. But this time, the dream was real. Mateo had never ridden in a car before. When the black van arrived at his village, shiny and silent, he thought it had come for someone else. Men in clean shirts spoke his name carefully, like it was something fragile. They told him he was invited to sing on a real stage, in a real city, before real judges. Mateo packed in silence. Just one old shirt. One pair of worn shoes. And a heart full of fear. The city was brighter than anything he had ever imagined. Buildings touched the sky. Lights burned through the night. Traffic roared like an ocean made of metal. Mateo pressed his face against the window like a small child and whispered, "Is this real?" Then came the stage. Rows of faces. Blinding lights. A microphone that cost more than his entire home. When his name was announced, soft laughter passed through the crowd. He didn't look like a star. He didn't look like Elvis. He looked poor. The judges smiled politely. Curious. Doubting. The audience adjusted in their seats, ready to be kind, or bored. Mateo stood still. Hands trembling. Lips dry. Then he sang. The first note crashed into the room like thunder. The air changed. People stopped breathing. One judge's pen dropped to the floor. Another leaned forward with widening eyes. A woman in the audience pressed her hand to her mouth. The voice didn't rise from his chest, it exploded from his soul. It was deep. It was raw. It was alive. The sound wrapped around the hall, climbed the walls, and shook every heart inside it. Mateo closed his eyes and forgot the lights, the cameras, the fear. He sang like he always had, like a hungry boy fighting the dark with music. When the final note fell, the room stood in silence. 1 second. 2. Then, the crowd erupted. On their feet. Screaming. Crying. A judge finally spoke, voice broken. That was not human. Mateo opened his eyes. And realized. His life had just changed forever. After that night, Mateo's life moved faster than he could understand. Interviews came from every corner of the world. Cameras followed him. Headlines shouted his name in languages he couldn't pronounce. Music producers who once ignored singers like him now begged for a meeting. They called him the new Elvis. But Mateo didn't understand fame. He only understood hunger, and how it felt to finally escape it. His videos crossed mountains, oceans, and borders. In just weeks, millions were watching his performances again and again. Elderly men cried remembering their youth. Young kids listened in shock, wondering if magic was real. One famous music critic wrote, "Elvis had style. Mateo has soul." But money did not change his heart. When Mateo finally returned to his village, dressed in clean clothes and riding in a car that once scared him, the road filled with running feet. Children shouted his name. Mothers wept openly. Fathers stood tall with pride. He did not build statues of himself. He rebuilt homes. Roofs became strong. Floors became clean. He paid hospital bills for neighbors who once gave him food when he had nothing. He helped children go to school with shoes and notebooks instead of hunger. Every wall he fixed carried the echo of his voice. Yet the greatest moment of all came quietly. Mateo returned to his old broken house. He stood inside the tiny room where he once sang to forget his pain. He touched the wall and closed his eyes. And then he sang again. The same deep voice. The same power. But this time, there was no hunger inside it. Only gratitude. Only love. Only purpose. From a dirt floor to a global stage. Mateo had not just changed his life. He had changed the lives of everyone who once believed he would never become anything at all. The night of Mateo's first grand concert arrived like a dream he was afraid to touch. The stadium glowed under thousands of lights, filled with screaming fans from places he had only heard about in school books. Posters with his face waved in the air. His name floated through the crowd like a prayer. Backstage, Mateo stood alone in front of a mirror. For a moment, he didn't recognize himself. The same eyes. But no more fear inside them. The same voice. But now heard by the world. When he walked onto the stage, the crowd exploded. The noise was louder than any storm he had ever known. Lights flashed like stars falling from the sky. He held the microphone tightly and took a deep breath. Then he spoke. "I used to sing to forget my hunger," he said quietly. A silence fell over thousands. "Now I sing so no child ever sleeps hungry again." Tears fell openly in the audience. Then the music began. Mateo sang Elvis Presley's greatest song in his own voice, deeper, darker, richer. The crowd swayed. People held hands. Strangers cried together. The sound was no longer music. It was healing. When the last note faded away, the stadium stood still. Then thunder. Cheers so loud they shook the sky. People whispered through their tears. Elvis had a legend. But this man has a mission. Mateo looked up into the lights and smiled softly. He was no longer the poor boy with a hungry stomach. He was the man whose voice changed destiny. And somewhere beyond sound and time, even Elvis himself would have stood and applauded.